Do you want to discover more joy, peace, and freedom with food, exercise, and your body? Here we bring a compassionate, holistic, and sustainable approach to fitness so you can fully enjoy the life you want and express your unique self with the world. I'm Michelle Roscoe, and I want to help you find fitness freedom. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, welcome to the podcast. Today I have with me Samantha Holmgrem. She is a registered dietitian in Ontario, Canada. She was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis at 24, so she gets what it's like to have chronic pain and fatigue. She is passionate about helping people design flexible routines that you can maintain through all life's ups and downs. She uses mindfulness and intuitive eating to help people make connections and love their life again. Samantha lives in a small town with her husband, toddler, and dog. She loves being surrounded by nature all year long, though could do without the mosquitoes, knitting, drinking tea, and reading fantasy novels. It's so good to have you, Samantha. Welcome.
Thanks. I'm really glad to be here and to have a conversation with you.
So I want to understand more about your unique experience as a dietitian and someone who deals with chronic pain and fatigue. But first of all, what got you into your work as a dietitian? What led you down that path?
Yeah, so I love dietetics. I actually didn't know that dietitians existed until I started university and there was the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition. So I started trying to figure out what the heck this is all about. And one thing I really love about dietetics is that it has a more long-term focus than some other areas of healthcare. What you eat today definitely affects how you feel today. If you eat certain foods, you might feel bloated or unwell, or you might feel energized and able to do more. But it has an even bigger impact on how your health is 5, 10, 15 years down the line. What you do today is going to have compounding effects for your life for years to come. And that is just so powerful and exciting to me. And we dietitians in healthcare are also really well placed to help people look at the bigger picture of health and your habits and see how everything starts to fit together. And I love being able to take that bigger picture lens when working with people.
That is so cool. And I agree with you. I think that's one of the neatest things about food and nutrition is that what we eat can affect our health and thus affect all of our lives so much. So we have so much power, even though it seems so simple, we have so much power with what we were putting in our mouths. And like you said, not just for today or tomorrow, but for the long term.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
awesome. So what would you say is your approach to food? How do you see food? And maybe even how, your upbringing or your background or your personality affects that too. What is your approach to food?
So my approach with food, whether in my own life or when working with clients, is all about wisdom, optimism, and simplicity.
I like that.
In dialectical behavior theory, and a similar idea is also in mindfulness in general, there's this concept of the wise mind. The wisdom and the perspective that comes when you consider both your emotional experience and physical experience and the rational thinking part of your mind and bringing those things together. When it comes to food, we can get there pretty easily, or maybe not easily, but effectively with mindful and intuitive eating. And that's the lens that grounds all of my work. Many people, you start a diet plan or an exercise routine, you get really excited at first and you're sticking with it. Maybe you even get some results, but then one day you have an off day. Maybe you get a flare up of your pain, or you have just an especially low energy day and you can't keep it up. You fall off the wagon, struggle to get back up, and just spiral downwards. But with mindfulness, with intuitive eating and tapping into that wise mind, you can discover your own personal path to wellness. So you have a flexible routine that moves with you through all of life's ups and downs, using your own body signals and that internal wisdom to inform your plan so that it works for you every single day.
That is so cool. I know I'm familiar with dialectical behavior therapy, and I've done a little bit of it myself, and the wise mind I'm familiar with. I've never really heard it so explicitly and directly applied to food, and I think that is so helpful and useful. And I have so many questions from that, like, how do you develop that wise mind? What is the part of you in relation to this model of therapy? What is the part of you that's, that emotional part? What is the part of you that's the rational part? And how do you identify those things to come to that center part? That's the wise mind. Do you want to expound on that at all, and how maybe you help your clients with that, or how you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, this actually connects with the idea of the diet cycle, that people can get trapped into, that diet restrict cycle.
Okay, yeah, let's get into that.
Absolutely. So that uh, diet cycle, binge cycle, it starts with restriction. You start a diet, you start an exercise routine that's really strict.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key starting point. And that starts to build this resentment of, why can't I go do this? Or that person has it so easy, they don't have to deal with the struggle. And you start to obsess over the things that are not allowed. So in a diet, you're not allowed to have chips or chocolate or whatever the thing might be, and you start to obsess about it. Eventually, you have a moment where you go into emotional eating, or you just figure, what the hell, I'm just going to have it anyway. And you eat past the point where you would actually have been satisfied. You eat past the point of fullness. You feel bloated. You feel the shame, the guilt, the lack of self-trust. And in your mind, it proves that you need the restriction. But all of that is based off of a false belief. Instead, going back to the idea of the wise mind, we can have the experience of eating those foods and enjoying them within this structure of the wise mind. So within mindful eating. The way out of that diet cycle is mindful eating and intuitive eating, and recognizing that the diet cycle is based off of false premises. We can just throw all of it away.
Yes. Yes, there's something underneath it.
Yeah. With mindful eating, the point is to notice your experience, to sit down with your meal, to notice that it is food in front of you. What are the colors? What does it smell like? To actually taste your food, the flavors, the textures, the aromas, the temperature. Notice how it feels as it settles in your belly while you're eating. And also notice how you feel throughout the day, having those multiple touch points with your body throughout the day, so you notice what is actually happening. By itself, mindful eating is a really powerful grounding practice if you're feeling really anxious, and it builds that sort of mindfulness muscle, but it also informs your intuition, your wise mind. So that's where we're coming back again to the wise mind of, when you start to become more aware of how you feel throughout the day, more aware of your experience, you can use that to tap into your intuition by asking powerful questions. Asking yourself, am I satisfied? Am I hungry? What do I need right now? And tapping into that intuitive sense. That is more of that emotional experience side. The rational side of our mind is the, I know I should be eating vegetables. I know I need protein. I know I need to drink water. All of these things that you know about nutrition, about health, about wellness in your mind needs to be paired with the experience in order to have that wise mind and to be able to develop habits that are personalized to you, to your experience, and that you can actually sustain because your rational and emotional parts of you agree with that.
So it's all in alignment.
Yeah.
I think that congruency. I love this. And I love this so much. I've never heard it put this way. I've never seen it this way, but it makes so much sense. So probably, I'm sure you see this with your clients, and I can think of this in my own experience as well in fitness, is that some people probably tend to be more on the rational side where they're overthinking in their brains and they're completely out of touch with their emotions. And then on the other hand, you have people where it's like, just do whatever you feel like, just go with that kind of side of intuitive eating without the knowledge or without the facts around, rationally, this is how my body actually works. So combining those two and figuring out that balance based on maybe your understanding of your own personality, or having a professional help you identify where your weaknesses and strengths might be, could be super helpful for developing that wise mind, right?
Yeah, exactly. And most people that I work with are way too much in our heads. And that's where the diet cycle comes in, or where the diet cycle attacks is that rational mental part of yourself. When we're in our heads too much and not giving any value to our bodies, that is a huge problem because you don't know how much food you need in your mind. I, as a dietitian, cannot tell you how much food you need.
Yes.
There are calculations that exist. They're not very accurate.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree.
And aside from the fact that at a baseline, it's not very accurate, the amount of food you need one day to the next can vary so wildly depending on your hormonal cycle, how much sleep you got, what you did the last day, what you did today. There's so many factors that go into it that I cannot calculate it. But your body knows.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we get hungry.
Right. Right. So I'm sure people listening to this are maybe thinking, oh, that's a lot. Like, oh, now I didn't think of that. And now I have to think of this. But it sounds like what you're saying on a most like fundamental level is, if people want to get out of that diet restrict binge cycle that is so common when you want to lose weight or when you're trying to change your body composition, the best way ultimately is to develop that wise mind and that balance between the rational and emotional parts of you. And that, takes practices, right? That takes practice.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And most people have overdeveloped their rational mind, and that has led to not having the checks and balance in that wise mind side, right? They don't have that emotional, physical part developed enough to be able to give the checks and balances to your rational mind. So you just go in circles.
Yes, yes. And I do want to point out here at this point, before I go on to the next question, is that connecting with our bodies is so intrinsically tied to like exercise and movement and meditating and stillness and giving ourselves space, because in the modern world we're so in our brains, like information, input, all of these things going on. I have so much to do that we don't take the time to really get into our bodies. And one of the best ways to do that is exercise. And as you know, exercise and nutrition are they're like a couple. They like a good marriage. They help each other and support each other out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that it is possible to be too much in your body and not enough in the rational mind.
Yeah.
But that is far less common. When I see that, it's actually the people who say they've tried intuitive eating and it hasn't worked for them.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
So the first rule of intuitive eating, the first guidepost is unconditional permission to eat. If you are hungry, if you want to eat something, eat it. That's the first step of intuitive eating. And the purpose of it is to break the hold that the diet culture, the diet cycle has on you. But that's not the last step. The last step is bringing in the rational side again. So yes, if you want to eat something, if you really want it, go eat it 100%. But also pay attention to how that makes you feel. Use that mindful eating to fully experience whatever you choose to eat and fully enjoy it, and pay attention to how that makes you feel so that you can know in the future and sort of mental time travel before you eat that thing in the future to say, how did that make me feel? How will I feel later if I eat this now? And if, for example, you know that drinking a can of pop is going to make you feel terrible, is it going to be worth the misery later?
Yeah, yeah. And I do want to point out, I think the key here is not just how it feels in the moment, but how
Yeah.
it feels long term. Because most people will say, if you tell them, oh, if I like, I would probably ask like 10 people, and 9 out of 10, maybe 10 out of 10 people, like, oh, I can't eat whatever I want. If I do that, then I'm going to eat everything. I'm going to eat all the sugar, I'm going to eat all the bad foods. So clarifying, it's not just the minute that you're eating it and the pleasure, the dopamine rush that you're getting from that sugar or the salt or whatever, but the next day, how are you going to feel? Or the next week, how is it going to affect your body? And keeping that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and redefining the word want. So it's not just what your taste buds want in the moment, it's what your stomach wants to have put into it
Yeah.
and what your brain wants. So it's when all three of those align, then it's an absolute yes.
Yeah. And this, I think the scariest part about that whole process is learning to trust yourself, which is comes into that other more like deep soul stuff of like, can I trust myself? Am I trustworthy? I don't trust my body. And of course, if you've had a history of your body failing you, so to speak, I put that in quotes, is you do have that lack of trust in your body, and that takes time and processing to get back. But yeah, that's such a great way of putting it. I love it. So how do you actually help your clients make healthier choices that support their goals? Like, what are your main focuses when you're working with clients, when they have like a specific goal they want to reach? How do you help them make those healthier choices?
Yeah, so a lot of it is guiding people through that, building the mindful and intuitive skills, especially if you have a history of going through that diet cycle a bunch. As you said, it takes time to trust yourself. So having a guide in that journey can be super helpful.
Absolutely.
But it's also a lot of like mindset reframes. So, for example, if you're in a really bad flare of pain, it can be helpful to focus on making things suck less.
Yeah.
Like it can feel really ambitious to try to feel good when you feel really bad. It
Yeah.
can feel really ambitious to try to be healthy when your pain is at an 8 out of 10. But there are a lot of small, simple things that you can do to make things a tiny bit better or prevent things from getting any worse.
Right.
When your joints really hurt or you're really tired, it's tempting to spend all day laying down. I know, been there, done that. Don't recommend. Because after a while of doing that, you get really stiff. If you lay down long enough, your muscles are going to start getting sore from not being used. You need to keep moving, even if it's a simple set of stretches or some partial squats or like a 10-second plank, doing
Mm-hmm.
something even in the midst of the worst parts. And on the food side of things, you may not be able to cook a meal like you usually do, but you can still bring in more balance while having the convenience. So if you're going for a bit of a meal or a snack and you can't really stand for very long, maybe you have some chips or like toast or something like that. Can you add in some nuts or some cheese for protein? Maybe you have something left over in the fridge. Maybe you have a little bit more capacity and you can roast some chickpeas for like a high protein, high fiber, crunchy snack addition. Can you add some raw fruit or some raw veggies to the side? Leaning on sort of the raw stuff that doesn't take much preparation time. Or maybe you can do like one of those sheet pan dinners that you just throw in the oven and it's done after a while. And you can do all of the prep while sitting at the dining room table. So point is, doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be what you normally do. But can you bring in a bit more balance, a bit more freshness, so that you can rely less on those highly processed foods that you know are not going to help you in that goal of making things a tiny bit better. Right? So when I'm working with clients, it's equal parts mindset and coaching and small practical tips of little things that you can do today.
Yes. Yes. It's perfection is the enemy of progress. And I talk about with my clients, like from the first week, it's like, you're not going to be perfect. It's all about how you can be just a little bit better, focusing on doing something rather than nothing. And then that builds the momentum so that you can like you said, it's like, instead of going with that fully processed option, maybe add a little bit, like a handful of nuts or a little bit of protein. And then that's going to encourage you to take that next step, whatever that is. And of course, perfection is not the goal, but progress is, and just feeling better little by little.
Exactly. And that sense of balance, I find, is also really helpful, of knowing, what does it feel like to have a balanced meal? Because that feels good versus something that is all carbs or, all raw veggies. It doesn't feel as good as something that is more balanced with high quality fats, high quality protein.
Yeah.
That ideal meal doesn't have to be perfect. It just
Right.
has to have enough of the different components to be balanced.
Right. I was just talking with some of my clients about that this morning. It makes a huge difference in your body and how you have energy levels throughout the day. So you mentioned like people maybe who are at an 8 out of 10 pain, and I know you are familiar personally with chronic pain and fatigue. How do people who are dealing with that pain and fatigue, how do they manage to stay active and exercise? Do you have any tips for people who are dealing with that? Because it is common, and I feel like in the fitness world, it's not even that addressed, or people don't talk about it very much. And a lot of people go unheard or unseen. So what wisdom would you like to share with the listeners here?
Honestly, okay, when you're in pain, your instinct is to avoid it. So your instinct is to not think about it, to not pay attention to it, and to avoid doing absolutely anything that you think might make it worse. That is your instinct. And in this case, your instinct is not entirely correct.
That's so interesting.
Or at the very least, your instinct might make you feel better now, but it's going to make you feel worse later.
Right, like the sugar that makes us feel good now, but doesn't help us later. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, when you're in that pain or you have the fatigue, you want to just lay still. When I had a really bad flare back in 2018, it was in every joint except my spine. Feet, knees, hips, shoulders, elbows, hands.
Wow.
Even sitting upright like I'm doing right now with my hips bent, that was painful.
Wow.
The only way to bring it down was to lay still. And at least, in the moment. But then as I was laying there, I would notice my quads really hurt. And for some reason, my triceps the back of my arm. Those
Mhm.
were the places that started to hurt the most. And I realized it was muscular pain because I had been not moving, other than getting up and going to the bathroom
Mhm.
or grabbing some water or food. I basically didn't move for days.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So I realized I tried at first just doing some stretches. So I thought, that would be safer, but it wasn't enough. So, given the muscles that were the most sore, I started doing every time I got up, like 2 or 3 partial squats, like maybe halfway down
Yeah.
to a normal squat, and like a 15-second plank. And it hurt my joints. Absolutely, not going to deny that. But it took the pain in my muscles from like a 5 or a 6 down to like a 2.
Wow.
So it was worth that momentary joint pain to make my muscles better. And that experience is what made me realize that instinct to avoid pain causes pain.
What an analogy for so many things, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So having the mindfulness to pay attention to what is my pain, what is it on the scale, and taking some time to define what the numbers mean. Like for me, a 4 is where I start to think about taking pain medication.
Mm.
A 6, if I'm taking medication and I'm at a 6, I need to go talk to my doctor. So like defining that is another little tip, but
Yeah, that's a great tip.
paying attention to where the pain is and how the pain is. So is it inside of my joint? Is it a tendon or ligament? Is it the muscles? And as you're paying attention, like I get a certain pain in my knee, and if I'm not paying attention, it just feels like my knee hurts and I maybe should take it easy. But if I pay more attention, I know from experience that it's actually a tightness in the IT band, which runs from my knee to my hip,
Right.
and I need to stretch that up. So my instinct to avoid moving, to avoid pain, wouldn't actually solve the problem because the actual solution is to stretch.
Mm-hmm.
So paying attention to your body, that mindfulness, it goes against your instinct, but it helps you in the short term and in the long term because you start to recognize what you need for your body.
Right.
And at the same time, we do have to be okay with being uncomfortable, right? Right now, my hands today have been fluctuating between like a 2 and a 4. Just the weather's being crazy and I'm a little bit inflamed because of the weather. It is what it is. If I were to not do things when I had mild pain, I just would never do anything.
Right.
So I have to be okay with being uncomfortable and okay with doing things that hurt. And it's a little bit of a struggle to find that balance.
I
It's
bet.
it's not something that you can logically figure out because there's just too many factors to try to consider logically. But if we pay attention to our body and just do what feels right, we get closer to what we need over time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of reminds me of like just negative emotions in general when we're talking about processing things is like if we're feeling fear or discomfort or some negative emotion, our instinct is to ignore it or to pretend it doesn't exist or to sidetrack ourselves. But the best way for it to come through us and for us to process it is to give all of our attention to it. And then if it goes through us more easily and be okay with a little bit of discomfort rather than trying to escape it immediately.
Yeah.
That's why I love
And
fitness. It's such a good analogy for life in general, right?
exactly. And I
Yeah.
was just gonna say the same thing, like with mindful eating, when I'm working with clients, it spills over into everything.
Mm-hmm.
Spills
Mm-hmm.
over into fitness, into, I notice I don't feel as good when I'm scrolling on the app, that app that we all do and
Yeah.
feel good. We all have
Yeah.
that app. And I had a client do this. She's like, I was on my phone on that app and I realized I didn't feel good, so I deleted it. I was just like, wow, good for
Right.
you.
Yes.
Or I was watching TV and put away the distractions. I was mindfully enjoying my show and I realized it was kind of boring. So I went and um, listened to a master class while, puttering around the house instead.
Yes.
Wow. Like
Yes.
it spills over into everything if you let it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And vice versa. That's why like getting therapy along with working on your health can be so helpful. It's that whole holistic approach that you and I both agree on. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
for people who deal with chronic pain or illnesses, I guess if you had to say what would be the best approach for them living a healthy life or as healthy as possible under, those situations or those circumstances.
Yeah. With that, we can talk about specific habits and general rules of thumb, get enough sleep, move your body, take proactive rest so you don't burn out, uh, learning how to recover effectively from a flare, nourishing your body, and all that is really important. But the thing that has the biggest impact, the thing that I talk about the most with people is your mindset, right? Taking care of yourself to do the things that, yes, make you feel good now, that you enjoy now, but then also compound and make you feel better tomorrow, the next week, next month, next decade, right? Because wellness and life are bigger than your health. Being at least reasonably healthy is helpful in order to give you the capacity to do more of the things you want to do. But trying to eat the perfect diet at the expense of spending time with your friends and family, or avoiding things you enjoy just because you might accidentally make your symptoms worse, those things just make your life small.
Mm, yeah.
The purpose for, pursuing health is about being able to live your life.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I want to help people eat well so that you can stop thinking about food and just go live your life.
Yes, that's why my podcast is called Fitness Freedom, is because I agree with you completely. Health is not the end all be all. It's not the goal. The goal is to live the life that you want to live, and health allows you to do that. So I'm completely on board and in agreement with that. And the mindset is so important as well. I love
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
So I want to ask this. I asked this question for all guests is if you could share one message about fitness or health with the world, like you had a speakerphone where everyone in the world could hear this one message, what would it be? What would you share?
It would be what we were just saying, that the goal is a life well lived. Taking care of yourself is in service of that goal. Health isn't the goal. It's something that allows you more ease in pursuing a life well lived. And if you don't have perfect health because you have a chronic disease diagnosis, that doesn't mean that you can't be well, that you can't live your life and live a life well lived, which is ultimately the goal.
Yeah, I love that so much. And two things come to mind when we're talking about like pain and illness. I know that we're talking specifically about physical illnesses here, but I think that this can apply as well to mental health issues and not letting those things completely take over your life where that you're not able to or you're not allowing yourself to enjoy the life that you want to live.
Exactly. And if your health, mental or physical, is impairing your ability to live the type of life you want to live, that is the perfect trigger to get in touch with healthcare providers, whether that's a therapist, your GP, a dietitian, a fitness coach, whatever your limiting factor may be. If it's preventing you from living the type of life you want to live, that is the reason to take care of your health.
Yes, it's an opportunity to go deeper with yourself. And while you're talking about this, especially this last part about living your life, I just get this feeling of it's ultimately an expression of love and care for yourself, right? Like this is the way that you can love yourself, not in just like, oh, I feel love for myself, but actually taking action for
Yeah.
your present self and your future self. It's like the best way that you can actually love yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. To act out the love for yourself, to not just feel it, but to do the action of love.
Yes, yes. Just like in any relationship, like a relationship with your partner or a friend or a family member, it's action. It's not just feelings or moods, right?
Yeah,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much. This has been incredibly valuable. I got some new insights on how to see intuitive eating with that wise mind. And I think you just reinforced everything you were saying, supported each other about holistic health, mindfulness, and being kind to yourself and taking those practical steps and having a big picture view of things. I really am so glad that we were able to do this, and I appreciate it so much because this is like this has been kind of a masterclass on like big idea mindful eating, especially if you deal with chronic pain or if you've struggled with a diet, binge cycle in your past. So thank you so much.
It's been lovely to have this conversation with you. I agree. We've been feeding off of each other so
Yeah.
much here.
Yeah.
Love
Is
it.
there anything else that you would like the listeners to know in terms of where to find you or how they can connect with you more? What's the best way?
The best way is to go to my website. I do have social media, but it's part of my life well lived. I'm not there that often. I do send out a weekly email newsletter. And when you sign up for that, you get a 5-day mini course on creating habits that stick, even with joint pain and fatigue.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to put that link in the show notes. And please, if you're listening to this, go there, click that link, sign up for the emails. It's going to be so beneficial for you, as I'm sure just from this short conversation, you've realized Samantha is a wealth of knowledge and help, and such a very wise mind approach to things. I can feel it. I can feel your wise mind, and I love it. Thank you so much, Samantha, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Sounds great.